Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com. We're waking up with watches. Everything you see here is in stock and for sale. So reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for all of your questions. Okay, we're starting off with a watch that does away with your worry about refinishing on pre-owned watches. The blue side of the moon became the blue side of the moon Aventurine in the Speedmaster Moonwatch collection back in 2018. A spectacular Aventurine glass enamel dial in a nearly indelible blue ceramic moonwatch case. This is a watch that includes everything you could possibly want in a timepiece. It is not as big as you think at under 50 millimeters lug to lug, though it is thick. It's 44.25 millimeters in diameter. Remember, all in sapphire and ceramic. These are lightweight materials. On my wrist, we'll get a better sense from a distance. It does fit, though I probably wouldn't wear it on a wrist smaller than mine. It's thick. There's no getting around that, but because the case back is so cupped, it sits lower than its actual thickness. Across the wrist, you can see I'm sort of in the clear, although it's borderline, and then over the top, the lugs are out to the edge of my wrist, but not beyond. The watch includes the blue ceramic case, and I cannot overemphasize, the deeper I get into my watch collecting journey, the less tolerance I have for dents, divots, scratches, and especially refinishing. So when you buy a ceramic used watch, you know that there has been no refinishing because none is necessary and none is possible. So the lines are as sharp as the day they left the factory. And if you're not one to shatter sapphires, and most people are not, you're never going to run into any trouble with a ceramic case. We'll wind here, and I'll try to demonstrate some of the functions of this watch, which is simply chock a block with features. We've got a radial date, we've got a Moonphase, we've got actually two chronograph counters over at 3 o'clock. See the superimposed hours and minutes for the chrono? Then we've got chronograph seconds at center. We have a hacking seconds function, so you can set the watch easily. And then to show off to your friends, we have an intermediate position where you can adjust the moon phase. You can see we have this beautiful chiseled style moon, and then in the opposite direction, it adjusts the calendar. We've got a vertical clutch column wheel inside, 60 hours of power reserve, automatic, 2 barrels, coaxial escapement, virtually amagnetic. And you can see a full balance with a free sprung. Well, it's a full balance bridge with a free sprung balance to make it more shock tolerant. You can actually see the column wheel through its bridge. And this is the 9904, a master chronometer that's been tested for chronometry in 6 positions, fully cased up, as well as for anti-magnetism, water resistance, shock resistance, power reserve, and winding efficiency. So it is the full package. A few tasteful rose gold accents on the dial, and no shortage of luminescence, including the chronograph seconds hand. All right, let's stick with Omega for a while. I always like to include one watch that's fairly attainable in the show, and today this is that watch. Taking a look at the Omega Constellation Globemaster, this back in 2015 was actually the beginning of the master chronometers in Omega's catalog. It is a tribute to the famed 1950 Pan Constellation. The 1950s Pan Constellation, starting in 1952 with the inaugural model, had a beautiful faceted dial that for many Western collectors became the essential constellation, the archetypical model that they think of when they think of a constellation. In 1982, the Griffin Claw debuted, the Manhattan style. Well, that's been very popular. In the West, it's always been the Pan Connie that folks associate with the name. So Omega said, let's have both. And so in 2015, the Globemaster debuted. It is part of the Connie collection. It's about 12.9 millimeters thick, 39 millimeters in diameter. It's a sort of quasi-tonneau shape with an integrated bracelet, and being 100 meters water resistant and well loomed, this might be the most unexpected full integrated bracelet sports watch on the market today, because people generally don't think of it as such. The watch features no shortage of luminescence, which I will show you now. It's 46 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, though a little bit broader when you add the end links to the bracelet. The original Connie was an observatory chronometer, and so the image of the observatory is featured on the case back of the watch. There's also a evocative star on the dial side. 60 hours of power reserve. It has all the capabilities of the blue side you just saw, with the addition of one feature we'll note in a moment. The bezel is a lovely tungsten in fluted fashion. It's incredibly hard and scratch resistant, and it acts along with the sapphire as a heat shield for the steel case, and there is a slight tonal difference between them in person, probably the world's most subtle two-tone. The watch is short across the wrist, and I guess the best way to show that's probably going to be to do a wrist roll down the barrel. You can see the lugs do not out over the edge of my wrist. Now here's the feature I spoke of a moment ago. we have this time zone function, so you can jump hours backward and forward. You can even drive the date in both directions as you jump time zones. A very handy dandy feature. Okay, let's go upscale. Let's go way upscale. Let's go back to 2019 and the roots of the modern Zeitwerk. This was the first of the twin-barrel Zeitwerks. The Zeitwerk Date, launched in 2019, it is surprisingly wearable. Yes, 44.2 millimeters. It's bigger than a standard Zeitwerk. It's also thinner at 12.8 millimeters thick and 52.2 lug-to-lug. It's really as easy to wear as any traditional Zeitwerk. What makes it special is that power reserve doubles. From 36 hours, it's now 72. We also have a system that allows you to jump the hour rather than having to scroll wildly through the minutes to set the time. You now have a jumper that allows you to set the hour individually. And we've got a separate control that allows you to jump the radial date. You see how the date orbits through these little numeral-shaped apertures? It's a little red backlight, so to speak. And then, of course, we have the winding of the Zeitwerk, which remains one of the great tactile pleasures in the world of watches. The gray part of the dial is made of sterling silver, and then the center dial, that's actually made of German silver with a rhodium plate. That's called the time bridge, and it's based on the Semper Opera's 5-minute clock, so the Dresden Opera House. The idea was originally coined by Günter Blümlein before he died. He created some concept sketches of what he thought such a watch would look like. And of course, it's not just a jump hour, and in this case, it's not just a calendar. It is also a constant force device. One of the big changes for this generation of the Zeitwerk is that the mechanism that features the remontoir, it's a second locking escapement, twin third wheels and a hairspring between them. But this structure is now arrow straight rather than bent like a broken arrow. Finish is world class, and you can see, truthfully, this watch couldn't be a whole lot smaller simply due to the size of the movement. We have freehand engraving, engine turn perlage, streifen. We have solarization on the wheels of the winding system as well as the barrel, black polished as well as fire blued screws. And yeah, we do actually have quite nice mirrored anglage. Also, take a look at the wheels and see how they all have micro beveled teeth. Attention to detail. It's a white gold watch. It's weighty. You really feel it. But on the wrist, it's not overbearing. It's not too big. It's large, yes, but that's sort of the point. And all of the additional size can be explained by the orbital date system. It's not big for the sake of bombast. A really cool watch, and frankly, Grubel Forsey, de Bethune, Zeitwerk, all of the boutique independents that specialize in off-kilter styles and advanced mechanisms, really, they don't come out ahead of this Lange. It's more like a dead heat qualitatively between Lange and a lot of those very high-end boutique independents. Some might say Lange has moved into league with the Holy Trinity of Switzerland. I would argue that at the very top of its tech tree, it's probably even a class above. I think finishing, styles are different, but in terms of technical ideas, I think Lange shows some real blue sky thinking. Hard to believe that the Zeitwerk has now been with us in one form or another for 16 years. It seems as fresh as ever. And by the way, you just want to see how the triple jump works. It works like this, just like that. Okay. Richard Mille. Back in 2007, RM answered the call from its collectors for something thinner that could be worn with formal attire, and the RM16 was the result. Now, there's also a 17, which is a tourbillon version of this, and the 20, which is a pocket watt version, but I have to say that the 16 is my favorite RM, at least if we're not counting crazy things like the RM53 Pablo McDonough, but more than any RM5, RM10, or RM11, this really speaks to me. It was a watch designed for elegance, and you can see here a rare rose gold version. It lives up to its name. This is the extra flat, RM16 extra flat. Flat means 8.6 millimeters thick, 50 millimeters from lug to lug, 38 across, not including the crown. And you can see how the camber or the curvature of the case assists with the fit. It's a thin watch, but it's not a small watch, as you can see on the wrist. I would say wrists my size and larger are welcome, and of course it fits easily under a sleeve. But if your wrist is much narrower across, I would say chances are an RM5 would probably be a better fit for you, or an RM67 if you want something thin that is also a little bit smaller. But a cool watch, and one that really speaks to the appeal of RM having a very technical aesthetic. A dial that is luminescent. We'll see just to what degree right here. And then we have a sapphire over a second sapphire. The second sapphire sits on top of the movement, and it acts as the platform for the numerals and the frame for the date. Now, we do have here a bizarre stop seconds capability, even though there is no seconds hand. A little bit more practical is the fact that we have a quick set for the date itself. Now, the movement has been skeletonized and made entirely out of titanium, and you can see the little location of the date right there. We have a carbon fiber flange outboard that mounts the hour indices as well as the minute hashes. Taking a quick look on the reverse side. The movement features a variable winding efficiency rotor, so these two white gold winglets change the winding action more or less active depending on your level of activity. Now, you need to have that set by your RM watchmaker, but just advise when you take the watch in or send it in for service. Twin barrels, 55-hour power reserve. It is Vaucher based, and you can see that it actually has the Vaucher star on the base plate right there below the balance. That's how you know. But what's interesting here on this RMAS7 movement is that the case back has actually been drilled out and evacuated. So the sapphire has been cut to make a little well so that the rotor can sit inside the sapphire, allowing the watch to be made thinner still so the extra flat can live up to its name. A very cool touch. Keep in mind there is a case back sticker on this watch, so the view of the movement is not quite as clear. That's just because of the adhesive. Okay, here's a watch that I think represents outstanding value. And it's an interesting watch because, of course, we've had the Mad one before. Blue, red, green, and the Castelbajac in primary colors, but this is the Mad 1S, launched in 2024. This was the first Mad 1 to feature a Swiss movement, the automatic 68-hour La Joupre G101. It's also the thinnest by far. Previous editions were 17.8. This is 15.3. The scrolling time display, you read from the side just like this, makes it a bit of a driver's watch. And you can see how the time scrolls past. It is an elaborately luminescent timepiece, by the way. Steel, 42 millimeters in diameter, 50.3 from lug to lug. You can see that the rotor is loomed, but so is the rolling barrel time display along the side. And the watch, in purple, is the variant available only for MB&F Tribe, that is collectors, and friends, contributors to the design or components. There was another version for the general public that was sold by raffle, but that one has ice blue accents. The purple one is Tribe and Friends. So this is kind of the most exclusive version of the only Swiss-powered Mad 1 watch. This is the Mad 1S. You can see it's unusually thin for a Mad 1 and easy to wear across the wrist. An outrageous watch, and maybe not the most precise time teller, as you only have one time scale. That, more than the movement, is responsible for the thickness of the case, the loss to the minute scroll. But this watch is all about the vibes, and the vibes are excellent. As you can see, a very comfortable timepiece to wear. You can see on the back, Mad Editions. That is the company Max set up to market the Mad 1. Strictly speaking, it's not an MB&F, but it is the first Mad 1 to be almost, I would say, entirely Swiss in its critical components. I'm not claiming that none of this was made by overseas supplier. I'm just saying we all think that the heart of a watch is the beating heart of the watch. It's the movement, and this one hails from La Chaux de Fonds rather than the previous examples, which had a Miyota movement. Okay, de Bethune. This is a rarity, black zirconium. So you have DLC on top of zirconium. Zirconium, much like titanium, lighter than steel and harder than steel. This is the de Bethune DB28 tourbillon zirconium, launched in 2013. Our archives show that maybe 6 were made. This example right here is immaculate. The nice thing about DLC-coated zirconium is that when you put a hard black coating on a hard base metal, you don't get the scratching through that occurs when you have a soft metal underneath a hard coating. That causes the hard coating to crack like an eggshell collapsing on the yoke. You need a hard backing if you want to use DLC and get the full scratch and dent resistant advantages of DLC. So we've got that here. 42.6 millimeters in diameter. The watch is surprisingly only 11.5 millimeters thick. Variable geometry lugs. The watch is super light on the wrist, comfortable, and because of those lugs, you can see how it will conform to the size of your wrist, so I have no trouble wearing this. The case is beautifully made, and de Bethune makes its own cases, dials, and movements, so this is a fully integrated manufacturer that even last year in 2024 only made 331 watches. Now on the back, you can see the power reserve indicator, 5 days. elaborately finished, it's nothing compared to the dial. Now you can see the twin barrels, self-adjusting. You cannot accidentally overwind this manual wind watch. Look at the blackened and mirror-finished deltoid barrel bridge cover. Look at the tourbillon, 63 parts. It has a mass of 0.18 gram, 18/100ths of a gram, with the lightest piece being in the 10,000th of a gram range. It's made of titanium, it's made of white gold and silicon. You can see that the wheel as well as the escape wheel below that and the bridge for the escape wheel made of silicon, and then the rim of the wheel is made of white gold, and then it's a 30-second tourbillon, which means it spins at twice the speed of a standard tourbillon, and it beats at an El Primero like 36,000 vibrations per hour. So it's got a manic aesthetic, and it is the world's lightest tourbillon. The balance is patented, the tourbillon is patented, the self-adjusting barrels are patented, the floating lugs are patented, and yes, that unique hairspring, which is cut into two pieces shaped by hand and clamped back together, flat and thin like a flat hairspring, but also breathing concentrically like an overcoil. It's got a lovely cadence. Let me hold it up to the mic, see if you can hear it. Don't know that you can, but it's nice because in a quiet room at night you can hear it chugging away. And the finishing, as you can see on the dial, is world class with everything up front, so you don't even have to take it off the wrist. All right, now the watch in today's show that I could most envision myself owning. This is the H. Moser Cie Endeavour Perpetual Tantalum, a 2023 launch from Moser featuring a hammered style white gold dial that has been colored to create this lovely aqua blue using vitreous grand faux enamel. So we have 4 different pigments to create this blue fade, 4 different types of glass melted down in a kiln at 800 degrees Celsius to create this smooth gradient fade translucent over the hammered white gold base. So sort of like flinke, which is guilloche or engraving underneath translucent enamel. Here we have a hammered dial under translucent enamel. Power reserve indicator, 7 days advertised. In fact, it'll run for almost 9. We have the Moser Perpetual calendar system designed by Andreas Streller in the 2000s. The way this works is you can adjust the date in both directions. You have 12 hours, 12 months. There's a little stub index. See how that works? Adjusting the date and the month forward and backward. And look at the date window there. See how there's an overlapping disc? It is a big date system with overlapping discs, so you can get large numerals without winding up with a watch that's this big. It's a very clever system. Oh, and by the way, there is no nighttime danger zone. You cannot break this by setting it at the wrong time. There's another interesting feature here. It's a double pulse system designed to prevent you from accidentally resetting the time when you aim to set the calendar. So when you first pull the crown, it stops. Release, pull again. Now you activate hacking seconds and you can set everything. The watch sets beautifully. There's no wobble to the crown. Some crowns wobble like they're barely being held on. This is super robust. Now the tantalum. The bezel and the case are that mystifying blue-gray metal, and you can see that it's all the more dramatic with the Endeavour case. You have this concave bezel, concave all around, that flows broad at 12 and 6. You have this case band that's evacuated and mirror polished, and Edouard Mélin, the CEO of the brand, told me that they're going through about 1 set of tools per case with this watch. And you can also appreciate that there's a subtle two-tone going on, because if it looks like the crown and maybe the case back aren't quite the same tone as the tantalum, you're right, they're made of steel. Now the watch, I don't think I'm going to get in trouble there, it's a pre-owned piece, but the watch right here you can see features a full balance bridge using 2 hairsprings, and the 2 hairsprings are diagonally opposed, so because they're symmetrical and they're across from each other, the watch, in any position, those 2 hairsprings will deviate by an equal and opposite margin due to gravity. As a result, they instantaneously cancel out the effect of gravity. You could see golden chaton held by screws. You could see double-crested Côte de Genève, a full balance bridge, and a free-sprung balance. The real kicker is that Moser makes the balance, the hairsprings, the escapements, the escapement here being solid gold, 14 karat gold, mechanical grade to reduce friction. The whole thing lifts out as a unit to be replaced by a pre-serviced example when the watch goes in for service to speed up the process, because this is the most sensitive part of the watch when it comes to service. You can see Andreas Streller reasoned that you don't need to see the leap year function every single day. So he put it on the back of the case, and there's a little pusher on the case flank to adjust it. The watch is 42 by 13.7 thick by 48.5 from lug to lug. So I'm going to throw it on my wrist. This is a watch I have seriously thought about buying. Now, we made our own special edition with lapis and jade dials, but those were pure concept dials, no indices. I like to have a little bit of a frame of reference, so I actually prefer this version of the watch. You can see it's far inboard of the edge of my wrist here, and that's the advantage, too, of the shape of the case, which, if you look, is curved, including the case back sapphire, so it really hugs your wrist and feels great. Kudu leather strap, which is super cool as it's minimally tanned. You can see it hasn't been sanded down like a nubuck, so you can see a lot of the flaws of the natural hide, which I find beautiful. And very few Moser watches come with a full clasp. This one has a double deployment clasp in steel with trigger release, a feature I adore because it makes it that much more secure when it is on your wrist. This is not the most expensive watch on today's show. In fact, it's probably the fourth most expensive watch, and that by some margin. It is the one I want most, and it is the reason why I featured it last. A brilliant perpetual calendar with enamel dial, Schaffhausen provenance, made in German Switzerland, escapement, hairspring, and balance, all in-house. Andreas Streller's perpetual calendar, this wonderfully fluid tantalum case. This watch has it all. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.